Yeah, Kent State has a new offensive coordinator in Mark Carney, but he is a familiar face at Kent State as he was most recently the tight ends coach. What can you tell us about Coach Carney's offensive scheme, and maybe what can we expect here in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, Coach Carney's sets they're not too different from what we're used to seeing at Kent State. I mean, the last few years, under Sean Lewis, it was a lot of RPOs, a lot of just really quick, get as much plays off as you can. I think it's going to change a little bit. You're going to see a lot more varied tempos with Carney instead of just go all the time. You're still going to see the RPOs. You're still going to see zone reads, but there's going to be motion on every play and really just mixing up the tempos. That's what I noticed the most. I watched some of his Charlotte film when he was the offensive coordinator at Charlotte, and that's really what you can expect. It's not going to be too different, but it's going to be a bit of a fresh look. Yeah.
With on offense, it all kind of starts with the quarterback, and Kent State, has a great history of quarterbacks. We saw some of those highlights in the video there with Julian Edelman and Dustin Crum.
Yeah.
But and they returned Tommy Lulatowski, who started 3 games in 2023, as well as Devin Cargman, who also started a game in 2023, and Drew DeShields, who redshirted last season while he was recovering from an injury. They also brought in J.D. Sherrod coming over from Troy. How did the quarterback room look and shape up over the spring?
Yeah, right now QB1 it's Tommy's job to lose. Tommy touchdowns, we called him here at Kent State. He was kind of the guy that was thrust into the role when Alimo kind of wasn't really working out last year. I mean, even though Alimo did start a bunch of games, Ulatowski still played. It was kind of a 2 quarterback set, kind of like an open competition for most of the year. I think it would be smart of them to make sure that doesn't happen again. But right now, I think it's Tommy's job to lose, and I feel like JD will probably start the season as the backup. He led a really nice drive in the first half of the spring game. He's a good athlete. He's a little bit hindered by his release. It's a tad bit slow, and the arm strength I think has room for improvement. But I mean, I think he'd be a good MAC quarterback. I don't think it hinders his ability to play for this roster. I think he'd be a solid backup, and then obviously it's good to have a guy with experience like Cargman. I would expect him to start as the 3.
How is Drew DeShields' recovery coming along?
Yeah, so he's been a light participant in practice all spring. Pretty typical for an injury. He did not play in the spring game though, and I don't have a timetable on him right now. But who knows? We could see him at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, I know he was someone when he was brought in. From a recruiting standpoint, people were pretty high on him and really excited about him coming to Kent State.
Yeah, he could be an exciting player. Yeah.
Moving on to the running game, which had its struggles early on but improved as the season progressed in 2023. They do lose their second leading rusher in Jalen Thomas to graduation, but do return their leading rusher in Gavin Garcia, along with Xavier Williams and Curtis Douglas. They get a big boost from Kai Thomas, a transfer from Minnesota who had to sit out last season due to the transfer rules at that time, which have now changed. But how does this group look in the spring?
Yeah, Gav's a really solid runner. He always has been. I remember watching him his freshman year, and I was like, they might have gotten something special with this kid. He doesn't necessarily have the size, but he makes up for it in heart, and that's what you need out of those guys that are a little smaller. But Gavin's a hard runner. Of course, Xavier Williams. He's really more of a receiving back. I think they view him as a third down guy. And he's had some health issues lately. I mean, he's kind of struggled to stay on the field in his first few years here in college. I can't really tell you much about Curtis Douglas, but this Kai Thomas kid, transfer from Minnesota, there's a lot to be excited about with him. He's super explosive, and he has really excellent vision. I think he's really agile. He makes really good cuts, and he's actually really underrated in pass protection too, which, even though they're returning all 5 starters on the offensive line, it still never hurts to have a good blocker back there.
So you mentioned just this immersion of Thomas here. Did someone emerge in that as that one RB1, or is it Gav's job?
I would think it's Kai Thomas. I mean, because going back to the connection to Minnesota, I mean, Kenny Burns was his positions coach for the Golden Gophers. This is a guy who runs hard. He's really impressive with what I've seen from him. I kind of would expect him to be the one, and Gav will get his carries. And in the passing game, you might see X a little bit as well.
Despite the rotation at quarterback last season, the passing game definitely had its moments, and probably the brightest was the emergence of Krishan McCray, who was on track for a big season when he got injured in Week 10 and missed the remainder of the year. He comes back along with Luke Floria. They do lose Trell Harris, Jamil Gardner, but bring in Stanley King from Northwestern State and Sebastian Brown from Michigan State. How did the wide receivers look in the spring?
They looked good. I mean, I think it was important for them to get some size on the perimeter, and they definitely did that with Stanley King, who's 6'6", started his career at Rutgers, and now he's at Kent State after a little stint there at Northwestern State. I mean, he's going to be your Johnny Wilson type player from your Florida State receiver.
Yeah.
And Stanley Brown, of course, the Michigan State transfer. He was there since 2020, redshirted. He only played 7 snaps at Michigan State. But I think that it's a good sign because it brings determination. A guy with maybe a chip on his shoulder that he wasn't able to see the field. He's really talented. He actually played quarterback in high school, just near Detroit. But the receiving room is looking a lot more improved from last year, I would say, for sure.
How is Krishan McCray's recovery coming along, and have they set any timeline for him?
Yeah, he'll be ready. He played in the spring game. He had a touchdown and
nice
52 yards on what was the final drive of the game. And he's wearing a single-digit number now. He's wearing number 2, so that's a pretty big deal at Kent State.
Awesome. So, I mean, I think we can assume that McCray's going to be one of the starting receivers. Did anyone else kind of step up to join him in the as a starter?
Yeah, we talked about it. Sebastian Brown. I think he'll be a really important player for them moving forward.
All right. In 2023, the tight ends were not heavily involved in the passing game. But now with the tight ends coach becoming the OC, do you think there will be any changes under Coach Carney?
Not necessarily. I know that Coach Carney loves his 2 tight end sets, mainly for blocking purposes from what I've seen. If there were to be a guy who I'd like to see involved in the passing game, it would be Hunter Hopperton. This guy just transferred here from Rhode Island. He's a local kid, went to Streetsboro High School, which is just 20 so minutes up the road. And his brother Preston actually came here as well, as an athlete. So yeah, I would say don't expect too much change from the tight end position. I mean, the 2 guys that were mainly involved last year with Keenan Orr and Hayden Junker are no longer with the team. Keenan graduated. I don't think Hayden's playing football anymore. So I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I wouldn't expect too much, but if you're going to see a guy step up as the tight end 1, it's probably going to be Hunter Hopperton. That's my guess.
We talked about, you mentioned the offensive line earlier when we talked about the running backs, and that definitely looks like it could be a strength of the 2024 team as they return all 5 starters from 2023, as well as several key backups. How did that unit look in the spring?
Yeah, it's one of the few position groups in this program that's had some continuity. We're still feeling the aftershocks of Sean Lewis taking the Colorado job and eventually ending up at San Diego State, but I think Matt Limegrover, who's the run game coordinator and the offensive line coach, has done a really good job with this group. Matt's brought 30 years of coaching experience to the program, and he was the run game coordinator for that 2016 Penn State team with Saquon Barkley that won the Big Ten championship game. So I think it was also really important for the offensive line to get bigger, and they definitely did that. They've got a ton of guys that are 6'5" and taller. This unit has, like I said, it has continuity. One of the few position groups that had it. They looked good in the spring, and they're going to love to run block for Kai Thomas, man. I'll tell you what.
All right. If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
I would say Kai Thomas. I've been singing his praises the whole time so far, but yeah, I mean, he like you said, the transfer rules, he had to sit out a year. He's going to come back looking to prove a point.